Today, we're going to take a look at how the verb expansion rule actually creates verb tenses for us. So, we use the verb expansion rule for so many things. It's going to help us understand verb tenses, verb moods, and even verb voices. So, let's take a look at what we call the verb tenses. And we're going to talk ultimately about what the verb tenses mean and why there is no such thing as the future in the English language. So, take a look at our first example, which was the present plus understand, which should give us the word understand or understands, with or without the S. We call this the simple present. Right? So, we're simply going to take this answer and then attribute it to a particular time in our timeline, for example, and we're going to come back to that. But it is called the simple present. The present of be plus ing plus sleep gives us am sleeping or is sleeping or are sleeping. All of those would be correct. We call this the present progressive. So anytime I have an ing, we call that progressive. And then because of the word am, instead of the word like was, we call that present. So therefore, it's the present progressive. I'll bring up my little laser pointer here. So progressive means ing, and then it's present tense. The past of take is took, and we call this the simple past, right? The very simple past. So when we talk about something being simple, like there's no frills with it, there's no helper or anything like that, it's just simply took, understands. Simple present, simple past. The past of be plus ing plus cry. Well, I know the ing makes it progressive, but it's the past of be. So that should give me not am, but something like was or were. So I could say was crying or were crying. We call this the past progressive. Once again, the ing makes something progressive, and then it has to be the past of it. So it's the past progressive. Was crying. The present of have plus en plus go. Well, the present of have is either has or have, and the en of go, we think about the way that we transition from go to went to gone, and gone is the en form of go, so that gives us has gone or have gone. We call this the present perfect. Let's pause for a second to make sure we understand this. So, the perfect tense has nothing to do with perfection at all. It's not that. But we call something perfect because it's a period of time actually in the past. We'll kind of get to that here in a second. Just know that we call this the present perfect. We call something perfect anytime I have a form of have. So, if I have or has or even had, it's the perfect tense, but it's the present perfect because of the word have. Because the word gone is always in the past, but it's present perfect because of this have. It was have or has. Those are present tense verbs. We call it the present perfect. The past of have plus en plus swim, well, it goes from swim to swam to the ugly verb of swum. So this one would be had swum. And we call this the past perfect. Once again, we call something perfect if it has a form of have in it. In this case, it has had. And it's the past of it because it's the word had and not have. So there's the present perfect and the past perfect. Let's get a little bit more tricky with things. Let's do the present of have and en plus be plus ing plus want. Well, because I'm using the word have, I know it's going to be perfect. I see this ing, which makes it progressive. This whole thing turns into have been wanting, which we call the present perfect progressive. I know it's kind of getting meticulous here. Think about the reason why we call it that. Progressive because of ing, it's perfect because of the word have, and then it's present tense because of the word have been wanting. To contrast that, let's do the past of have and en plus be plus ing plus put. Well, the ing makes it progressive. I know that. The have is going to make it perfect. And then when I have the word past, it's going to be the past perfect. So this should be the past perfect progressive, had been pudding, as the past perfect progressive. And those are the traditional tenses that we're going to find as we build our timeline next. But if we want to talk about things that we have been taught in school that we believe exist, there are these fabricated or made up periods of time called the future. So if we want to, let's play around with it. Anytime we use the word will, it's actually creating something in the future, or at least what we would call the future. So the present of will plus begin is what we would sometimes refer to as the future tense. Will begin. Hasn't happened yet, so we call it the future. And if I want to continue this, I could say the present of will plus have plus en plus know. Well, it goes from know to new to known. And the word have is always perfect. So the word will makes it future, have makes it perfect. So this would be the future perfect will have known. And I could progress with this. I could say I can make the future perfect progressive. We'll have will have been knowing. There's all kinds of weird things you can do. I can do future progressive, will be knowing. But really, all those things are actually made up. Let's talk about what timeline looks like for us in terms of verb tenses. So, somewhere on your paper, let's make a basic timeline. So take some notes and make a basic timeline for me. So here's my basic timeline. Let's see if I can get back. I had to get out of here. So here's my basic timeline. And let's just simply designate some period as the present. The present is right now. And it's right now. And now it's now. Meaning the tense of present is always moving because it's just basically never standing still because the present is always moving forward because we're always moving in four dimensions. We're moving forward in time, and so therefore the present progresses. But everything behind this is something we can measure because we've been here. So that's the past. So in terms of grammar, the past is everything that's not the present, everything before. So the past just keeps extending infinitely behind us. But those are all things that have happened. That's why we can measure it. The reason we don't really have a future is because we don't know because it has never happened. So you can't measure something that doesn't exist. That's kind of the philosophical reason why we don't have a future. In terms of past, the past is really broad. And so, therefore, in terms of grammar, we have different levels of past or pastness. It's kind of nerdy, but we do. So the most recent past is what we call the present perfect. Remember, that's when we use the word have or has. And so that's most recent. So what happened last period, yesterday, earlier this morning, all those things would be considered the present perfect. It's the most recent past that you have. So give yourself a little block of time. It's this period of time that goes all the way up to the present, but it's the most recent past, the present perfect. And then the opposite would be the past perfect. It is the farthest away you could possibly be in the past. It is so long ago. It happened long ago. It ended long ago. It is so in the past. And then in between there, you have what we call the progressives. The progressives almost are these periods of time where they started and they extended for a period of time and then they ended. So this is what we would call the past perfect progressive. Um, had been eating. Well, I had been eating means I've been eating something a long, long time ago, and it was something that I did a long time ago. It extended for a period of time, it stopped. There is basically the past progressive, was eating or was crying. It happened in the past, some period of part of the time in the past, and then it ended. The present perfect happened recently. Have been eating, meaning it happened recently. And then there's also the present progressive, meaning it started in the present and it's still happening, is eating. And so we have these different progressives. What we don't have is really the future. And if you want to, you could make a note to yourself saying, hey, the future's out here. There is the future perfect. There's also the future perfect progressive. There's the future progressive. There's all kinds of weird stuff, but basically it's all this that's out there that hasn't happened. And once again, the reason we don't really have the future is because, quite honestly, it has not happened yet. And when it does happen, it's no longer the future, it's the present. So let's take a look at how we actually can construct some of these kind of verbs. So let's try number one. If I said the present perfect of to drink, well, the present perfect. Perfect means I have to use the word have or has. And so I have to use have or has and then combine that with the word drink. And so I would say, well, it's have or has drink, drank, drunk. Remember, any form of has or have has to use the en form. So it's always the third one: swim, swam, swum, drink, drank, drunk, drive, drove, driven. So we would say have or has drunk is the present perfect. The past progressive of to seek. Well, progressive is ing, so it's seeking, and it's the past. So it has to be something like was or were. So it's the past progressive, was or were seeking. If you try number 15 on your worksheet, if I said the future perfect, well, let's just be creative with it. We know perfect is the word have or has, Future is the word will, and then we have begin. So future is will, have or has, and then begin. But remember, we have to use the perfect form, always requires us to use the en. So we go begin, began, begun. And so we'd say, I will have begun. All right, so try a couple of those other ones just to see how well you can do with building verb tenses.